From jaw-dropping spinning attacks to jaw-crushing front kicks to the face, today's video covers some of the most violent head kick knockouts in the history of mixed martial arts, and not just the UFC, which means that you are guaranteed a wholesome experience with a few never-before-seen KOs that deserve more recognition. So let's get started. Joaquin Buckley versus Ippo Kasanganae. We'll kick things off with Joaquin Buckley's hellish knockout that broke the internet in 2020 and turned him into a viral sensation overnight. Buckley fought Ippo Kasanganae at UFC Fight Night in October of 2020 and produced a technique that is more common in video games and taekwondo tournaments than in MMA.
On total strikes at the moment.
After a decent back and forth, Buckley attempted a left high kick that was caught by Kasanganae, who tried to clear the leg as you are trained to do in Muay Thai. Unfortunately, he grabbed a hold of Buckley's leg for a bit too long, allowing him to make a tiny adjustment and leveraging his body in such a way that he'd spin and plant his foot on Kasanganae's face with a thunderous back kick to separate his foe from his consciousness. Kasanganae froze for a second and then toppled like a tree. Joe Harding versus Johann Segus. Now, if you've been following MMA for some time, you must have come across a certain fight highlight where a fighter dances like a fool inside the cage before getting brutally knocked out.
Again with the jab.
Oh! The dude who got his face kicked in is Joe Harding, a former amateur fighter who quit MMA in 2017. In his amateur title fight against France's Johann Segus, which took place in Essex, England at BC MMA 18, Harding entered the cage with the home crowd fully behind him. The Englishman probably got carried away with the support, and in an attempt to please the crowd, he showboated by dancing around the octagon with his hands low and mocked his opponent repeatedly. The trend continued for 2 rounds, with Harding landing his shots, showboating, and daring Segus to touch his chin. 20 seconds into the 3rd round, Harding teased Segus again with a balloon man dance of sorts, and having had enough of Harding's clownery, Segus landed a beautifully timed head kick that flattened the Englishman. Although Harding saw the kick coming, he couldn't move out of the danger zone quick enough and had to eat humble pie. Edward Kelly versus Mule. Edward Kelly is hardly a recognizable name in mixed martial arts.
Who the fuck is that guy?
Hardcore One Championship fans, however, know him for his flashy and exciting fighting style and knockout power, which he put on display against Cambodia's Mule. Now, the fight lasted only 21 seconds. The two fighters spent the first few seconds feeling each other out. Mule landed the first strike of the fight, a leg kick, but Edward landed the second, third, and final strike of the fight, attacking his opponent with a clean 1-2 combination before landing a head kick out of absolutely nowhere to send Mule flying face first onto the canvas. Valentina Shevchenko versus Jessica I. After moving down to flyweight, Valentina Shevchenko won the title and defended it a record 7 times, with her most impressive title defense coming against Jessica Evil Eye at UFC 238. The tempers were quite high in the lead up to the fight since I talked a lot of trash, way more than she could ever back up, and she had to pay a hefty price for it. 5 minutes into their fight, the American realized that she didn't belong in there with Shevchenko, who beat her from pillar to post. In the 2nd round, Shevchenko didn't waste any time and landed a piercing headshot within seconds to shut her opponent's lights out. Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort. Anderson the Spider Silva is the greatest middleweight of all time and one of the greatest pound-for-pound fighters ever, thanks to his stoppage wins against absolute phenoms of the sport. But his victory against Vitor Belfort is one of the standouts of his illustrious career. Silva put his middleweight title on the line against Belfort at UFC 126 in what was a highly anticipated matchup between the two Brazilians. Unfortunately, the fight itself wasn't as entertaining as the build-up, and it definitely failed to live up to the expectations. But the same cannot be said about the fight-ending sequence. The two had a lengthy feeling-out process and circled around for a couple of minutes, but as soon as the crowd started booing them for their lackluster fight opening, They upped the ante, and Silva caught Belfort with a brutal front kick to the face and dropped him. Belfort wasn't completely out, however, so Silva had to add a couple more shots to the fight-ending sequence, but the initial shot was picture perfect. Amber Librock versus Martina Gendrova. Amber Librock was the underdog heading into her featherweight fight against Martina Gendrova in the PFL prelims in 2023. Gendrova was the better striker on paper, and Librock was expected to utilize her wrestling to take home a victory. Instead, Librock gave her opponent a face full of feet, landing an effortless head kick 2 minutes into their fight to send her opponent to the canvas before landing additional hammer fists and punches to finish the job. Now, if you are loving this video so far, show us some love by smashing the like button, as we want to know to make more videos like this just for you. McKee versus Dominic Mazzotta. McKee is among the top featherweights in the world that doesn't compete in the UFC, and throughout his career he has shown exactly why he has the skills to give the likes of Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski a run for their money. One such display of McKee's sheer brilliance came at Bellator 178, where he snapped Dominic Mazzotta's 9-fight winning streak in only 75 seconds. After a minute of trading shots, McKee landed a left high kick that stiffened up Mazzotta, who crashed onto the canvas in a heap. McKee then followed up an unconscious Mazzotta on the canvas and landed a meaningless hammer fist before the referee jumped in and stopped the fight.
Only the fight in front of you.
James Gallagher versus Ricky Bandejas. James Gallagher, aka Conor McGregor Light, was quite a thing back in 2018. Everything from his pre-fight trash talking to his antics inside the cage made fans call him the Wish version of the former 2-division UFC champion. But at least McGregor talked the talk and walked the walk in his prime. Gallagher didn't, and when he faced Ricky Bandejas at Bellator 204, he paid a hefty price for going overboard with his antics. During the fighter introductions, Gallagher screamed in Bandejas' face before the two were separated by security. Halfway through the first round, Bandejas dropped Gallagher with a stinging right hand before dropping him again with a devastating head kick, flush on his chin, and then following him to the mat to finish the job there.
Another right hand. He's in trouble. Gallagher's
Robin Catalan versus Gustavo Bullard. In another battle of the unknowns, Filipino sensation Robin Catalan squared off against the 4'11" Cuban monster Gustavo Bullard, a wrestling ace who is known for his heart and toughness despite being fun-sized. Now, the fight took place at One Master of Fate in November 2019, and despite injuries and issues, Bullard seemed to be in the driving seat thanks to his quick boxing combinations, takedowns, and clinch work. Catalan was having moments of his own, and he managed to have the biggest moment of the fight when a picture-perfect head kick landed right on the button. The Cuban fell face first onto the canvas and was motionless for many seconds. Edson Barbosa versus Terry Edom. Edson Jr. Barbosa is a human highlight reel. Throughout his career, he has folded his opponents with brutal knees to the head, body kicks, and spinning attacks. But his most impressive highlight is arguably his win against England's Terry Edom at UFC 142 in 2012. The fight was very much a mismatch as Barbosa punished Edom with painful leg kicks which badly hurt his mobility. The trend of Barbosa being the hammer and Edom being the nail continued until 2 minutes and 2 seconds of the second round, when the Brazilian found his opponent's head with a perfectly timed spinning kick and put him out of his misery.
take a chance and risk getting knocked out. Oh my God!
Edom was out before he even hit the canvas. Gabriel Gonzaga versus Mirko Cro Cop. Now, Mirko Cro Cop is hands down one of the scariest MMA fighters of all time, but his UFC run was pretty average by his standards. He even got knocked out by a stand-up comedian, but that's luckily not the highlight of his UFC career. The highlight of his career is his UFC 270 heavyweight fight against Gabriel Gonzaga. A few months prior to facing the Brazilian, Cro Cop had made a successful debut by knocking out Eddie Sanchez in the first round of UFC 67. A win over Gonzaga would have earned him a title shot, and most people were expecting him to get the job done fairly easily. Gonzaga was aggressive right off the bat, whereas Cro Cop waited patiently for the right opportunity. The Croatian then went for a body kick that Gonzaga caught, putting his opponent on his back and punishing him with ground and pound. Cro Cop would eventually make his way back up, but a few seconds later he would go down and out when Gonzaga would land a thunderous head kick to send the legendary fighter into the Shadow Realm. Ronda Rousey versus Holly Holm. Entering her bantamweight title defense against Holly Holm at UFC 195, Ronda Rousey was on a tear thanks to her high-level judo and an armbar game that was considered the best in the world at that time. Holm, who had a background in boxing and kickboxing, was considered a favorable matchup for Rousey, who was expected to do business as usual. Take Holm down, snatch her arm, force a quick tap, and keep that gold strap wrapped around her waist. Holm ruined Team Rousey's party, however. In the first round, Holm lit Rousey up like a Christmas tree with straight punches and frustrated her by avoiding her takedown attempts. At the end of the first 5 minutes, Rousey was breathing heavily and looked rather disoriented. She had never experienced such adversity before, so obviously she had no idea how to deal with it. In the second round, Holm's stinging punches continued for 50 seconds until Rousey lost her balance after getting punched in the face. And while she tried to regain momentum, Holm launched a missile of a head kick that dropped Rousey for good. A couple of hammer fists later, the fight and Rousey's reign of terror were all over. Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 2. Now that ultimately brings us to the greatest head kick knockout in mixed martial arts history according to Joe Rogan. When Leon Edwards locked horns with Kamaru the Nigerian Nightmare Usman at UFC 278, the majority of MMA fans were ready to bet their house on the champion successfully defending his title for a 6th consecutive time. Despite a tough first round, Usman managed to secure his takedowns from the second round onwards and even beat Edwards up on the feet. At the end of the fourth round, Usman was up 3 rounds to 1, and win looked like a formality. Since the Jamaican-born fighter was in desperate need of a finish, his coach gave him some tough love in between rounds, which sort of worked wonders. In the 5th round, Edwards upped the ante, dodged the takedowns, and let his combinations flow. Less than a minute before the final buzzer, Edwards brought his Rocky story to life by throwing a feint and following it up with a vicious head kick that sent the champion in a place where time doesn't exist. Pound for pound, headshot, dead. Now with that, we have come to the end of our video on the wildest head kick knockouts in MMA history. If you liked our video, please show us some love by subscribing and turning on the notifications so we keep bringing you videos like the one that you just watched. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.